Warning: the Not Real Art podcast is intended for creative audiences only. The Not Real Art podcast celebrates creativity and creative culture worldwide. It contains material that is fresh, fun and inspiring and is not suitable for boring old art snobs. Now, let's get started and enjoy the show.
Greetings and salutations, my fellow creatives. Welcome to Not Real Art, the podcast celebrating creativity, the creative class, and creative culture worldwide. I'm your host, Sourdough, and on today's episode, I'm honored to be joined by conceptual artist and fellow podcaster, by the way, who has a new show coming up on Friday, September 27th at 7:30 at the Studio Channel Islands Art Center in Camarillo. Camarillo? Am I saying that right?
Camarillo?
Camarillo, California. I went to public school.
Me too.
I am pleased to welcome the one and only Miss Art World, Katherine Cooksey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited that you're here.
Oh, yeah.
You're classing up the joint, Miss Art World.
Well, good. I don't think that's true.
How are you feeling about your show coming up?
You know, have you ever had a time in your life where your eye twitches like nonstop?
Yeah. It's twitching right now.
Well, so mine has been twitching for the past week because I'm stressed out. I'm excited, but I'm also very stressed. I feel like I'm inviting people to a birthday party and I don't know if anyone's actually going to show up. Yeah. So there's like anxiety that my art won't turn out the way I want it to, but then also no one will come. So.
Because if they don't come, it's a horror movie, right? Like it's supposed to be an art film. Yeah. Well, I'm sure I know I will be there. Okay. So you'll have, me. Well,
and I have a very, very supportive large family. So I know that at least my family will be there.
So you have a lot of siblings? When you say large family, lots of cousins? What?
Lots of so I'm one of four. Mm-hmm. And then I have lots of cousins and a lot of people that still live in Camarillo and LA area. So
yeah. So you have four siblings. Are you the oldest, middle, youngest?
Second oldest.
Second oldest,
yeah.
Okay.
I have an older brother, me, younger brother, little sister.
Okay, mixing it up. Are you guys pretty close?
Oh, we're so close. We're weirdly close.
Weirdly close? Well, define weirdly. What does that mean? Weirdly close? That sounds, if you're close with your siblings, that should be a good thing, right?
I think so. But I do know other people that are like, yeah, it's a little weird that you only hang out with your siblings. I'm like, but they're my friends. I love them the most.
Are you guys stair-stepped in terms of age?
So between the oldest and the youngest, it's 10 years. And so it's about 2 to 3 years.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of ideal, I think, in some ways. Well, that's cool. Are they artists too? Or are you the only artist of the family?
Only artist in the family. And really out of all the cousins, I'm the only artist as well. Okay. My older brother has a podcast too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's kind of how I got started in the podcasting
fun. What's his
world.
Podcast about?
It's called Stuck in Traffic. It's very inappropriate, but very funny.
By the way, I love inappropriate, so I definitely want to check this out.
You would like it.
Has he been doing that a while?
Couple years, and he usually interviews people who are creative, but not just artists. So dancers, comedians, actors, yes, all of that.
Very cool, very cool. So as I said in the intro, you are, as you just alluded to as well, you are a podcaster. I've heard a couple of your episodes. How's it going? How are you feeling about the podcast?
It's really good. So I am not someone who naturally likes to talk or talk to other people.
Oh, interesting.
So it's been...
You hide it well. You fool people.
Thank you. It's been great for me to just learn to be comfortable speaking and not being shy about talking to other people. So we started it in February. It's called the Art World Podcast. Yep. And we interview other artists and kind of like this podcast is all about having fun.
Yes. And your partner in crime, Lisa.
Yes.
Right? Where is she at today? What's she up to?
She is working. So we both work for the city of Santa Clarita. She does events and I do the art side. And so usually during lunch, we'll podcast together. And then I'll drag her to art shows and make her do art performances with me.
Oh my God. So she performed. I wondered if that was her because I've watched a couple of your YouTube videos and I was wondering if that was her and I couldn't quite tell.
Oh yeah. I drag anyone that is willing to be in a performance. Yeah. I totally take them up on it and force them into doing art performances with me.
Oh man, that's great. How many performances have you done to date?
Ooh, That's a really good question. I don't know. I want to say probably about 20, maybe 25.
Must be hard to, I mean, they must blend in together somewhat over time, right?
And I went into grad school as a painter and left as a performance artist. So it's kind of, I don't want to say new because I've been doing it for about 4 years now, but it's new in the scheme of me as an artist.
Well, and I wanted to drill down on that a little bit because in preparation for our episode, because you and I met briefly at Art Share LA, shout out Cheyenne and Art Share. And I just, it was so fun meeting you because you had the Miss Art World, you had the sash and, everything you were representing your title. And we hit it off. It was great. But then when in doing research for this little chat today, I watched your presentation. I guess it was your MFA presentation at Pratt. Right. And you were talking about your sort of evolution. But at that time, you were talking about performance art, but clearly you'd done a lot of visual art. But obviously now, however many years on, I mean, you're a full on performance artist. I mean, what was that evolution like? I mean, how does one go, from being a painter to a performance artist, at least in your case?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I loved grad school because I had great teachers, and I went to Pratt Institute in New York, and they really pushed me and questioned what I was doing as far as the medium that I was using. But I think performance art was a natural progression because I had been doing pageants for such a long time, and that's very performative. And then even before that, my father trained all of us siblings as mimes, and we would...
Whoa. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not going to let you skip over this.
I don't share this with most people.
Oh, we got gold today, people. This is hot off the presses. So your dad trained you and your siblings as mimes.
Yes.
Okay, now this implies that your dad is a mime.
Yes.
Okay, and so if he's teaching his children how to be mimes, he must be a pretty damn good mime.
He's excellent.
And is he a professional mime? Is this something that he has made money with?
Yeah, so when my parents were really young, they worked at the Moore Park Melodrama. I'm not even sure it's there anymore. But my mom was an actress and my dad did lights. And he had one line in a play that he had to do and forgot it. And so he challenged himself that, he's going to go on stage during intermission and not speak, but mime. And so then from there, he started training as a mime and started making money as a mime and got his 4 brothers to mime with him. So it's a really weird family thing.
This is, by the way, you and I have chatted a little bit before the show, and I learned a little bit about your grandfather, and I'm hearing more about you. Clearly have an awesome family.
They're pretty great.
Okay, so we can move on, but that's amazing. So now, did all of your siblings and you take to this miming? Were you good students?
I was probably the shyest child growing up. So it's really interesting that I'm the one that has really embraced performance art. Yeah. I think my older brother loved miming. He'll even sometimes go out to the pier and mime, do street miming. But we definitely don't continue miming today. We stopped pretty much when we were in college.
Well, that's sad.
So my parents just had their anniversary.
How many years?
It was 25 years.
Wow, that's great.
And so they had a big event, and so we did a
mime?
mime performance. Yes, and I need to put it up on YouTube. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so you had this miming background as part of your journey here. Okay,
and that kind of made pageants easier. So I did pageants for a long time, and then from there, it just kind of made sense to use performance or use my body in art.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what is performance art?
To me, it's using the human body to deliver a concept. And a lot of people think that means that you have to be naked and you have to be doing something kind of weird or out of the box. And for me, it's using the body. You definitely don't have to be naked, but it's conceptual. So there should be some kind of meaning behind what you're doing. And for me, performance art is so great because I usually don't do a performance over and over. I try and do it only once. I don't practice it. It's not a play. And so I'm on this journey with the audience, and we're kind of both in this unknown where I don't know what's going to happen and they don't know what's going to happen. And so it's this kind of real moment that we're discovering something new together.
Yeah. Sort of unfolding in a very sort of honest, organic, kind of natural way.
And I'm biased, but I feel like it's the purest form of art.
Interesting.
Because
why do you feel that way?
It's so real. It's not something tangible either. So you can't buy it off of a wall. Yep. You have to be there and have to be present in that moment to experience it. And I don't think most other art forms are like that.
Right. Right. I'm going to say something and you're going to roll your eyes. But this is part of what I say when people ask me why I go to Burning Man. Like, this is kind of a little bit of what I say. It's like part of the joy. And by the way, I'm not like one of those annoying Burning Man people that like always wants to talk about Burning Man. I've only been a couple of times. But this is what I'm saying. Like, if you're not there, it's so ephemeral. Right. Like if you're not there, you can't enjoy it and you don't see it. You have to be there. And I think that there is something to be said for that in terms of the integrity.
That's why. So I've never been to Burning Man, but it's on my list of things to do because I realize that is kind of, it's an experience. Right. And if you're not there, you can't experience it fully. Yeah.
It is a performance art sort of piece on a grand scale, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So when I was watching some of the videos, it looked like, I don't know which one it was. Maybe it was I think I'm going to answer my own question here because it was the icing take 2. So it was the cake you were doing. What was it called?
Frosting.
Frosting. Mm-hmm. Jeez, sorry.
You were so close.
I was so close, but so far. But it looked like you guys were using those sort of icing, dispensers? What are those called when you squeeze out the icing?
Icing bags?
Bags.
I'm not sure. It could be a proper name.
Right. So will you be, tell us about the show coming up. What, is it going to be, how will it be the same or different from some of your other performances?
So it's called Sentenced to Death. Okay. And it's the first time that it is a solo performance night. So most of the time I'm invited to do performances that are along with another exhibit. Okay. So I go in, opening night, do my performance, and then leave, and the show goes on. Yeah. But this is a one night only. If you miss it, that's it. Mm-hmm. And it's only going to have performance art. So I have 3 different performances planned, and they all revolve around the idea of death. But if you know my work, I kind of have this dark humor, dark comedy into it. So I have a couple different cool things that are planned. I don't want to give away too much, but I am currently working on this piece. The gallery has a really tall ceiling. And so I'm working on this piece that will attach to a model and it will cover her face and her hair will go all the way up to the ceiling in this Marie Antoinette. Mm-hmm. And there'll be Barbies and glitter and all kinds of things within it. Yeah. And then so the first performance, I'm going to get on this 30-foot ladder and cut off all her hair. So everything will come out and fall out. And the piece is called guillotine because I'm cutting off, what a lot of women would see as her beauty is her hair.
Sure. Okay. So we'll tease the audience with that. I won't drill down on that anymore. That's enough. People can come and enjoy the rest and be surprised and excited and what have you with the mystery. Have you ever lost anyone close to you? My
grandparents, I've lost a couple grandfathers. I've been really lucky where I haven't lost anyone super, super close. Yeah. But my husband lost his mom, and that was really hard to go through because I didn't know her that well, but having to try and support him in this passing, but he's also a man, and so he expresses his loss differently, and so that's a very delicate.
Was that early on in the relationship? You guys have been together how long?
We have been together 8 years.
8 years, okay. Yeah. And when was that in your?
That was it was right before we got married.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, it doesn't, how hard, how difficult. Yeah. It's just, I ask about it in part because death isn't necessarily a theme I would have expected from you. Right, a little bit. It was a nice surprise. I was like, "Ooh, okay." You said dark comedy, whatever. But our association around death, or I should say, our socialization around death, is also personal, right? Like, I death touched my life very early on. And yet I know, like my wife, for example, she's not really, I mean, we just lost a dear friend. And I think it was, one of the first times loss has hit so close for her. Her parents are still alive and well. My parents are still alive and well. But death is a motherfucker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And it's really hard. I think for this performance, and this sounds really light, but it is, so the 28th is my 30th birthday.
Okay.
So
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yay. So we're multiple celebrations.
Yes. But in kind of the world of pageantry or modeling or, women, when you turn 30, you're kind of, I'm doing air quotes, but sentenced to death. Like that is the end of the period where you're attractive and beauty and all that stuff.
You're not fertile anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Like most of the cutoff age of pageants is 30. Like you can no longer compete unless you're, married. Then they have a whole separate category. But 30 is kind of this end of an era of when you were young and beautiful and wanted. And so the idea of sense. Yeah. It's kind of that play into I'm 30 and
so it's more right. So it's more of a comment or critique on this world versus our mortality per se. Right. Okay. I get that. Wow. So, what do I know? But it seems like a lot of gals get into pageantry work because maybe they're pushed in by their moms.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not, but that's from my observation.
I think that's true for most women. It was not true for me at all.
Well, that was my question. It's like, from what I gather, you had to convince your mom to let you compete.
Yeah, my mom was pretty much not into. So when I was born, I was naturally feminine, like just pink and glitter and
girls girl.
And my mom was like not into that at all. She was like, how is this half of me? So I wanted to be a cheerleader. I wanted to do pageants, and it was really tough to try and convince her to let me do those things. Sure. And it was really my dad convincing my mom to say, hey, I know you're not into this, but she is. And so you have to support her. And so my mom did a really good job. She would go with me. She'd help me pick out dresses, but it was definitely pulling teeth for her for a while.
Yeah. But it's such a fascinating story because you knew that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah. And
for some reason that it was what you were curious about at the time.
It was a weird part of my life. So in the 5th grade, I was diagnosed with an eye disease. And
what's it called, the disease?
Dominant optic optotrophy.
Wow.
I don't think I'm saying it right.
Yeah, well, who can? It's a mouthful.
Yeah. And then because I was diagnosed, my dad wanted to teach me how to paint. And then I took a art class in junior high, and my teacher said, look, if you can't see, you can't be an artist. Stop doing art. And at that same period, there were pageants advertised at my school. And so that was kind of like, well, if I can't do art, let me try this. And it was the start of something that was really interesting to me.
Yeah. I'll let experts sort of discern, the psychology behind, how the performance of that led you to your performance art now. How many years did you compete?
So I started competing when I was 12, and I have competed ever since then. So my last pageant that I did, I was actually in grad school, and I was making work about being a feminist and feminine. And my grad teacher said, look, you are thinking about pageantry different, because I was more critiquing it within my work. And so she said, now that you're thinking about it differently, go and do another pageant and do it for research. And then I won that pageant, which was the Miss New York World pageant. And she thought it was hysterical. She was like, there's no way in hell that I thought you were going to win. And I was like, I know. Thank you. And so then I was forced to go on to nationals. And I used all of that research to do my thesis show for grad school. It was great. But that was the last pageant that I've done. So I've been competing for a long time.
So clearly your intelligence must be your secret weapon. I mean, because it's what do I know, right? But like, I'm just, it's a pageant of beautiful women. So like, okay, fine, beauty's a constant or whatever. But I'm guessing the judges are also discerning based on talent and skill and intelligence and those things. Why do you think you won?
That's a really great question. I think so. A lot of pageant women are super smart and super talented, and most people don't understand that.
So I just made a really bad generalization. Stereotype, sorry.
I mean, they're just incredibly impressive. And I think most people don't realize that. I think part of the times that I've won is, I think in pageants, they're looking for someone who is real and has related, because you're going out and you're in the community and you're doing fundraising events. And so they are looking for someone that has a good heart and
integrity,
also,
authenticity. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Character.
Yes. So I encourage everyone, if you see a pageant girl and you think that she's going to be mean or stuck up or whatever, she's probably the nicest person you'll ever meet.
Right. So can you teach me the wave? Like, how is the wave?
You got to move your elbow a little bit more.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So just, okay. If our viewers could see us now.
Perfect. Nailed it. I think your future is in pageantry.
Oh my God. Oh, thank you. I've been wondering about a career change. That's fantastic. So what was your talent?
So I actually play the harp.
Wait, miming?
it should have been miming. That would have been a statement to go on stage as a mime.
You have to do another pageant for research and your talent has to be miming.
I really should do that. Mm-hmm.
So that's in the future. What was your talent in the past?
I play the harp
you
as
play
well.
The harp?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, see, look at that. Okay, layers on layers on layers. How old were you when you started playing the harp?
Around 14, when I realized if I'm going to do a pageant, I need a talent.
Right. So why the harp?
I've always been kind of a Renaissance woman, so it just seemed like a really unique instrument to learn how to play.
Yeah, so you have a big harp at home?
Yes.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Apparently harps come smaller size too, I guess.
Yeah,
like travel size harps.
Those aren't as good because they don't have the same amount of strings. So I have a big harp that has a good amount of strings and different levers at the top, so I can adjust them.
So will you ever incorporate your harp into your performance art? Or have you?
I have not. Yeah. It's a really good thing to think about.
Okay. Well, because then is it just a concert? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and for some reason, a lot of my performance art ends up with me destroying something.
Right.
And so harp is very expensive.
Yes, you do not want to destroy the harp. Although that would be amazing. It's like a sledgehammer to the harp. Or something. So you're so fascinating. I so appreciate, one of the things that, you can tell me to fuck off if you don't want to talk about it. But part of the reason why I want to bring it up is, and I'll just share before I set it up, is just, so I was a super sick kid, damn near died a couple of times, but ended up being too stubborn to die. But I managed to lose the hearing in my left ear. So I have been essentially deaf. My wife would say dumb too, but I've been deaf in my left ear my whole life, and in a large part of lost a lot of hearing also in my right ear. So there's a good chance in my future I will lose my hearing. You were diagnosed with the eye disease how old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was, I think 11.
11. Okay. So I lost my hearing, I guess, when I was almost 2. So it's kind of just been something, right, that you live with and you adapt to, what have you. It must have been very hard at your age to be diagnosed. What was that like for you?
Well, before I answer your question, Can you share what?
Happy to. I had spinal meningitis. I was unconscious for about 6 days. If it doesn't kill you, it usually will take, your eyes or your ears or your legs or, so I was very fortunate to lose hearing only in one ear and not both ears. So I had spinal meningitis when I was 11 months old. Then I had Meniere's disease when I was around 2. I was one of the youngest kids or people ever diagnosed with Meniere's disease. Typically, it attacks, or senior citizens tend to get Meniere's disease. Babies don't tend to get Meniere's disease, or toddlers. So that was very unusual. And then I had pneumonia 10 times over 10 years. So every year I had pneumonia until I was 10. So from age 0 to 10, I was just a sick kid. You know what I mean? After 10, I've been great, except for a few hangovers. You know what I mean? It's been a much better ride after I turned 10. So I don't know, what happened, but clearly, the first 10 years were pretty rough. So it is what it is, right? These things make us stronger, hopefully, and better. And so when I heard your story, I was just moved because clearly, that's a life-changing event.
Yeah. And there's always the chance, like you, that I could lose my vision fully, or it will progressively get worse as I get older. Like my grandpa has it. And so I can kind of see what he is dealing with now. And
so it is sort of genetic or...
Yeah, it's weird. It skips every other generation. So my kids won't have it, but their kids will most likely have it. And my grandpa's actually an artist too.
Oh, wow.
And so he's the only one that has it, and I'm the only one that has it. And we're both the artists in the family. So I think it's actually become more difficult, I think, as I've gotten older and have kind of seen my own, what's the word? It's like things that you can't do, like my own limitations. Because as a kid, you go, okay, I can't see very well, whatever, I'm going to go play. But now as someone who's working full time and really has to deal with not having very good vision and not having it correctable. So I can't have glasses, I can't have contacts to correct it. It's just something that I live with. I've moved past it affecting my art. That was just, something that I've dealt with. And I know as an artist that it doesn't affect the work that I'm doing. But I think the biggest fear is seeing how it might affect me professionally, or, there will become a point where I can't drive. And so I need to rely on somebody else to drive me to openings. And that's going to be really hard to lose that kind of independence.
Yes. Yeah. So were you able to get, to the extent that you've gotten to a place of acceptance, was that through hard work and therapy? Was that just through the love of your family? Was that through blood, sweat, and tears on your own? Like, how did you work through that?
So the teacher that kind of affected me was in junior high. And it wasn't until probably senior year of high school when something clicked. And I realized, it was the moment that I realized that not all adults are right.
Yes.
That there's a lot of them.
Yes. That is a true statement.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, just because you're...
How liberating, right?
Yeah. It was amazing. And so I think I realized, oh, this teacher was wrong and an asshole. Yeah. And I've always had to deal with my eyesight because I needed large print textbooks. I needed to sit in front of the class. And there are a lot of teachers that didn't want to get... So it was always this fight. Yeah. And my parents were always willing to fight for me to get the accommodations that I needed. So realizing that I can fight for what I need and adults are wrong sometimes. And then I just started painting, and I did not put a paintbrush down for years. Like I was just all into art after that.
Yeah, well, good for you. No, I know. It's really weird when you realize adults are human beings too, right? I remember that vividly as well. And for me, I guess it was maybe more within the context of my parents. Like, you idolize your parents, and then one day you realize like, oh, right, they're just human beings too, and they're doing their best, but they don't know it all, unfortunately.
Yeah. You're like, oh no, you're wrong. It was just such a clear, I just remember it so clearly, like the click in my head that they don't know everything and I can decide things for myself.
Well, I'm trying to forgive my parents because my art teacher told them in third grade that I had talent and they should find me an art teacher, a private art teacher. And my parents, in their, very practical Midwestern sensibility, said, oh no, it's just a phase.
Oh no. So you could have been like this huge,
I was going to be huge
artist.
I was going to be, and they ruined it.
Gosh darn those parents.
Yeah, no, it is something. And I don't know you well, but I'm willing to bet that, I'm just going to say it this way. My sense is that you're way too classy of a person to have done this, but I have to ask, did you ever circle back to that art teacher and tell them how wrong they were?
You know what? I probably would have, but he actually was fired.
Well, there you go.
Mm-hmm. So I have that, justification.
The universe took care of it.
Yeah, it was like, hey, we'll handle this for you. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, good teachers are so hard to find, right?
Well, and art is so hard too, because you want to critique your students, but to say something like that, especially to a junior high child, like it stuck with me for a long time.
Well, and by the way, if you really understand art, how could you ever utter such a statement?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there's so many artists and musicians that have dealt with physical disabilities and have grown and even become masters because of it. So it was just something that was a stupid thing to say.
It's a really stupid thing, And how many other lives, how many other kids did he, how many other spirits did he kill?
Exactly. Right? That's my biggest fear when I'm teaching classes. Like, I don't want to ever affect a child so much that they stop making art. Right.
Yeah, man. Good teachers are so hard. I was talking to somebody, or I should say good teachers are rare. That's what I mean to say, especially when they're not paid, what they're worth and everything. I was talking to somebody the other day about one of my favorite teachers, Mr. Still, and Mr. Still, who was my 5th grade social studies teacher and my 5th grade math teacher. And he taught social studies essentially by showing slides of his world travels with his wife. So he and his wife would go all over the world and, these exotic places. And then he would bring these photos back and he would, show us the world through his slides and his travels. And of course, we had textbooks and whatnot, but, these photos for me, being a visual person, really brought the world to life and instilled in me a wanderlust that was already there. So he was just awesome. I always look back on Mr. Still and think highly of him. Well, the cool thing was that in 92, I was actually invited back to my elementary school to give a presentation about an expedition that I participated in near the Arctic for a year. And where we lived like Grizzly Adams and, built a cabin and hunted for our meat and, all this stuff. And Mr. Still heard that his former student was coming to speak, and he came out of retirement and came to the school and got to watch me give my slide presentation, right? And this was however many years later, right? Like from 78 to 93, what? And I got to look at him and hug him and shake his hand and say, I'm here because of you. You inspired this, and that's the power of a good teacher. And so, the reverse is true, right? I mean, a bad teacher can do real damage.
I love how full circle that is, that he was able to see you become the traveler and really know that he had such an impact on you. Like, that's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I felt that way. Like, I just was honored to be able to tell him thank you, Yeah, so it's great. And, I was having a conversation earlier, though, about schools these days and the arts programs that are being defunded. I am who I am because we're both public school guys. We're kids. We just established that a minute ago. I don't know about your school, but I know my school had a healthy budget when it came to the arts. I mean, yes, we had.
Yours had a healthy budget?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes, different time. So you're grappling with something different these days. So growing up in the Midwest outside Chicago, 70s and 80s, I graduated high school 88. The economy was relatively good. We had a good tax base. It was a working class, kind of community. But our school had a robust budget, not just for academics and sports, but for art. So we had, I had jazz band, symphonic orchestra, jazz band. We had thespians and theater. We had, arts and, we had a gallery in the school. We had, what I mean? It was just like really robust. And, it was the way I describe it, it was a very strong liberal arts program, right, at the school. So I am who I am because of that. Right. And we're living in a time now where, these budgets are getting cut. And so, what are these kids going to do?
Yeah. And really, if they are not introduced to art through their family, then they're going to have to wait way later in life to hopefully stumble into a museum or a gallery and then discover how important art is. I did not grow up with a robust art program. we couldn't even have lunch in the cafeteria because it had mold in it. We had no theater. And so I am extremely lucky that my father was a painter and that we just had this love and appreciation for art. But it is horrible to think that kids won't have that. Yeah. And moving forward, it's so important for kids to learn not just art, but just how to create, like to have a creative mind. Yes. I think one of the number one things that businesses are looking for is creative people.
Absolutely. My God, I was just a friend of mine who I say friend, he's 20 years my junior, but I've known him since he's a kid, and we've sort of, I don't know, he's, mentored him a little bit here and there, but he was so proud to tell me recently that he got accepted to business school. He was going to get his MBA. And when he saw my kind of sober reaction, he was, sort of disappointed. He said, I thought you'd be more excited. I'm just like, honestly, the last thing the world needs right now is another MBA, So if you had asked me ahead of time, I would have told you go to art school or go to design school, because I feel like the problems facing mankind are not going to be solved by the same old thinking, the same old degrees, because by the way, MBA's got us in this fucking problem to begin with. But don't get me started.
My husband is a traffic engineer, so he enjoys jokes where it's like, 3 people are in a boat and the boat's sinking, and one's an artist, one's a engineer, and one's, I don't know, a scientist, and they're like, who do you get rid of? And of course it's always the artist. And it blows my mind, because I'm like, that's the person I would keep. That's the one that can think outside of the box to solve the leaking boat.
Yes. It's so true. Well, so there are organizations that are working hard, right, to try to keep the arts funded, to help, these schools, these kids get the arts education that they need. American for the Arts is perhaps one of those organizations. I saw that you spoke just recently at the national conference in Minneapolis, I believe it was. What was that like?
It was amazing. That was my first time going to the conference. So I'd gone before to their arts marketing conference. So I work for the city of Santa Clarita, and I run their civic and public art programs. And so what is amazing about Santa Clarita is they have put in a lot of money for funding the arts in all different ways, in education, in public art. And so I was invited to go and speak about public art for suburbs. So we're not LA, we're a family town that isn't necessarily artsy people. And so my job is to educate people in the nicest, safest environment to say art's for everyone, and this is how to bring in new and creative, innovative pieces to a community that doesn't necessarily appreciate art. And so it was an amazing experience to be able to speak about that and to be in a room that has a bunch of people that are fighting for the same cause throughout the U.S.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the so-called experts a few years ago, were so excited about, STEM programming, and finally somebody looked up and realized, oh, wait a minute, we forgot the A for the art, so now it's STEAM.
Exactly.
Right? It's like, really?
How'd you forget about us?
I mean, my God, that just, wow, that's really symptomatic of a much bigger problem, right? Well, are you familiar with the book Orbiting the Giant Hairball?
No.
Okay, so you'd probably love it. It's written by a guy by the name of Gordon MacKenzie. And Gordon was, for many years, I don't know if he still is, but for many years, he was the chief creative officer for Hallmark Cards. So he wrote Orbiting the Giant Hairball, which isn't a big book, it's a great book. And it's fundamentally about how do you maintain your artistic integrity working in a corporate environment, right? But he tells this very poignant, sort of tragic story about, his talks that he gives to students, so he'll go and, to give back, and he'll go talk about art and creativity at, elementary schools, high schools, so on and so forth. And he starts every talk basically with the same question, which is, who here is an artist? And so, of course, in kindergarten, every kid raises their hand, right? You know where this is going, right? So literally each year, and by, it just gets less and less. And by the third grade, he said one kid in the back, is brave enough to like raise their hand that, oh yeah, I'm an artist, and it's like, what the hell are we doing? Why is it that we've created a system that literally, squeezes that out of us somehow?
Or even there's always the, oh, you're an artist, you work at McDonald's type of thing. Like there's no career for an artist to actually make money, which is completely ridiculous. But just having that mentality of, oh, go get a real job. You can't make any money. You're not going to be a productive member of society if you're an artist. Like all of that, I think definitely affects children and what they're wanting to pursue as an adult. And so we kind of beat art out of kids. And actually, keeping the arts in schools was my platform in pageantry. So I'd go into schools and talk to kids about why it's so important to be an artist and to claim that and stay creative and to pursue careers in the arts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So tell me more about the Americans for the Arts and the conference and how that was for you. What did you talk about?
So I talked about how to bring in the public art into a community that doesn't necessarily appreciate art. Yeah. And what's interesting is every community does it differently. Yeah. So as a staff person, I actually don't get to pick any art pieces. Right. It's all done by committee. Mm-hmm. And so what I talked about is kind of the process that we use in the city as far as government and picking art, which is always interesting being on the government side and on the art side, and how do those kind of mix in together. And then also how to work with artists, because most people in government aren't artists or don't know how to work with a creative person. Yeah. And so kind of strategies on keeping a creative-minded person on track, or how to work with them with contracts and timelines. So all of that was really a part of the talk.
Yeah, and this kind of goes back to what you and I were discussing earlier about sort of failure of arts programs and art schools and design schools to teach the kind of the business side of things, whether it is contracts or time management, project management. It's amazing to me, that so many amazingly talented, brilliant, intelligent artists are so inept.
They are. And you're like, but you're a genius. Yeah. But you literally can't answer email. It's amazing. Right. But I think what has really helped me as far as being an artist and business minded is working in I worked as a gallery manager. And so I worked with artists and realized, okay, this is a mistake. As an artist, I should not do this. Like, I learned a lot about being an artist by working in a gallery setting, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Well, because I guess, as a gallery operator, right? I mean, you're dealing with that inefficiency or that bottleneck a very real way. Yeah. Right. If the artist doesn't return your email, and yet, I don't know. Tell me some horror stories.
Oh my gosh. So there's one artist who, when an artist has a solo show or is maybe like in a 3-person show, I understand as an artist being so focused on it because it's your life. This is your work. You want it to be amazing. And so I had one artist bring in all of his pieces, and he had about 40. And with the gallery, we always had a curator come in and they would hang the show. And this helped because a lot of artists can't curate their own work. They can't edit out the work that's not needed, and they can't hang it because if they hang it, most of the time it's overpacked. Yeah. And so we told the artist to leave. He already knew he had to leave. We hung the show. He came back and hated it, and just threw a tizzy fit, like threw his camera, broke his camera, was just having kind of a breakdown. Yeah. And so I ended up having to ask him to leave. We ended up having to have a sit down talk about, appropriate behavior, because when he was kind of freaking out, it was me and him in the gallery, and I'm a woman and he's a man, and he's throwing things. And so I felt very uncomfortable.
He's being violent.
Yes. And so it ended up working out fine, but it was one of those stories that I was thinking I'm going to have to call the police. were going to cancel his show, but we were able to work it out.
Well, right. So, well, first of all, I'm sorry that happened to you. That sucks on a lot of levels, but I mean, also to be fair, right, to artists, temperamental artists, I mean, like assholes are everywhere and in every industry, right? Like, like while I'm listening to this, I'm thinking like, it's not acceptable for artists to be assholes, but you know what? It's not acceptable for anybody to be an asshole, right? And there are just assholes out there, and that's fucked up no matter what, right? But I mean, what gets me, and that's an exception, right? Let's be fair, right? Like that, temperamental, I mean, yeah, sure, there are temperamental artists and unprofessional artists, but for the most part, it ends up being like artists that are they don't want to read a contract, they don't want to sign a contract, they don't want to return an email, they don't want to manage money, they think that they're above it or that money's not important or that and it's like we were talking about the conference, our conference, the Not Real Art Conference for Creators earlier in the spring, and one of the things that I said on the stage, it's like it is perfectly to me, my 2 cents, but it is perfectly acceptable for you to be antisocial. Like if you don't want to go to network and go to gallery openings and be social and talk to strangers and make small talk, that's fine. But what's unacceptable is for you to be inarticulate about your work when someone asks you.
Heck yeah. Like I completely agree with you.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that should be like the moment when you shine. You can just stand there and be the antisocial artist in the corner, and that'll stoke the aura of your art and maybe, increase your prices. but when somebody comes and asks you about your art, that's your moment to shine. If you can't talk proudly and boldly and confidently about your work, why should you expect anybody to buy it?
Yeah. I think the biggest struggle that an artist has is you have to believe in your artwork. Yeah. Like you have to be your number one fan. And if you're not, then nobody else is going to believe in your work. And so I agree with you. I get upset when I ask an artist about their work because we do the podcast, and some have really critically thought about why they're making art, what they're using, what the message is. And even if it's abstract, you can definitely tell when an artist has really thought about what their role is and why they're creating. And there's some artists that haven't thought about that. And I think it's really important for artists to really think about why they're doing something so that they can communicate that with others. And I know it's not always fair to expect an artist to be able to talk and write about their work because they're naturally communicators visually. Yeah. But if you want to have people become supporters of your work or at least understand what you're trying to do, you have to be able to figure out different ways to communicate that.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things I've been thinking about because we have the conference coming up in the spring, right? So I've been starting to think about the programming for next spring and how it's going to be different. Will we have any, will we bring anything back or not? Probably not. We want it to be fresh. But it was funny. I was talking to this artist and I was saying, well, I was trying to do a little bit of a focus group of one, right? I was talking to the artist. I was saying, well, what would be meaningful to you in terms of programming? I said, I feel like maybe there would be some utility in having some programming around negotiating a contract or negotiating a deal or, what have you. And he said, he goes, that would be great if we knew how to communicate. Why don't you just start with some basic communication programming? And I said, you know what? Good point.
That's super honest.
It's a super honest and cynical thing, but it's true. I mean, to be fair, right? I mean, good storytelling is a skill and an art form. And, if you can't tell your own story, then you're probably fucked, but you should be able to tell your own story. But there are some real best practices and tenets around good communication, good storytelling. And so we're thinking about that in terms of how we can translate that in terms of, helping artists communicate better. Because, and my whole thing too is like, if you call yourself a professional artist, be professional. It's a very low bar to say, I'm a professional artist because I sell my work. That's like the lowest bar, but if you're truly a professional artist, then, you should be acting professionally.
Well, and I think there's strategy. So I was saying earlier that I'm not a natural talkative person. And so one strategy that that has helped me is I'm comfortable talking about my work with certain people. So, for example, my father, my mom, and my husband, and of course my siblings, so my family. And so I'll talk to them. They'll give me critiques and criticism. But what has been extremely helpful is listening to them talk about my work with other people. So I'll be at a gallery and my husband will get into a conversation and he'll be explaining my work to other people. And that has helped me so much, kind of, because it's sometimes difficult to
100%. You're too close to it.
Exactly.
Right. I totally get that.
And to even go to the point where I'm like writing down what he's saying so that I can really think about it and maybe even use that in my artist statement.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I so appreciate what you're saying because that's a critical point you're making. I mean, sometimes we're just too close to be objective, right? Sometimes it's the old saying about too close to the fire to see the flames or whatever, right? Like, and so that's a really good technique. What you're saying is like, listen to other people, how they describe it, because sometimes they're going to do it better than you, or they have that perspective that just gives you fresh words or new language that brings it to life, right? In a way. Yeah. It's so easy to be critical, isn't it?
So easy. One of Lisa, my co-host for the podcast.
Shout out, Lisa.
Yeah. One of our favorite games, and we're, terrible people for doing this, but our favorite game is when we go into gallery shows or exhibits or whatever, our favorite game is to walk around to each piece and then critique it. Yeah. And it could be about the concept, or most of the time it's about the technique. Like, oh, look at that ear. That ear is not a good ear, or that hand. Just because if it's done poorly, it's distracting. Yeah. But that's one of our favorite games, and then we feel like assholes. But it's,
Well, and this sort of opens up a whole new, kind of area to talk about, just in terms of, how art resonates. For me, I mean, I don't have my MFA to be able to deconstruct a piece and sort of critique it or discuss it within the context of history or what have you. I mean, a lot of artists can't even fucking do that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I mean, in terms of understanding art history or where their work sets up. But I do love sort of going in front of a piece and starting with how it makes me feel. Right. And I say this not for your benefit or my benefit, but because, for the listener out there who may be intimidated or whatever. Right. And, the reality is, art is about emotion, in my view, right? Art is about emotion. Art is about energy. And you should surround yourself with art that makes you feel good or makes you feel something. Hopefully it's joy or pleasure in some way. And we're in my office right now here. And I was, inevitably, it's interesting. People will point to things and say, oh, that's a great piece of art. And, where'd you get that? And I'll be like, yeah, I got that at a garage sale for $5.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And it's just about, I think so much is about, well, what speaks to you, but to your original point, like, these technique, context, thinking, the weak links can really stand out sometimes. What is the weak link in your work right now?
I think a lot of artists are critical of their own work. There's a couple different things that I really feel like I need to work on. A lot of that is communicating with the audience. I did an interview with another performance artist, Kate Durbin, and she called it passive aggressive performance art, is where you don't talk to the audience at all. It's like you ignore them. They're not in the room. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like all my art pieces, because I'm too afraid to engage with the audience. Yeah. And so I take them out of the equation. And so I think I really need to, that's my next goal for myself, is to kind of bring them in, or like force myself even to verbally speak in my performances, I literally don't do. And so that's something I need to work on. And then I think I'm thinking about this more, but my concept is so important that sometimes I forget about the aesthetics, and it's still visual art. So that's something that I need to still think about within the context of a performance piece.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting to think about, because of course, whether it's your pageantry experience or, doing the work that you do in government, what have you. I mean, clearly talking to people and engaging your audience is a skill set that you have. It's interesting that you have decided to sort of sequester that skill set over here as you're focusing on your art. And now the new challenge is that you got to somehow combine those two in a way that feels right.
Yeah, definitely. That's going to be my biggest challenge.
So how are you going to address that in the show coming up on the 27th?
I'm going to address it after that.
Okay. Yeah, more to come. Yeah. Well, no, it's a process, right? Like, you know what you got to do, and now you just got to figure out how to do it in a way that works for you. Yeah, that's great. Miss Art World, it's such a joy to sit down with you.
Oh, this was great. I had so much fun.
I have to confess, I was wondering if you would show up with the sash and the hair.
I have my sash on right now.
Oh, of course you do. Yes,
of course,
I'm sorry.
no
I'm just trying to fool the audience here.
No, I always carry it with me. Not with me. I don't have it with me, but I have it in the car just in case. But no.
So that's a question.
Okay.
So why not now? What's the criteria by which you decide to put it on?
When I was explaining this to people, I was saying that Miss Art World is a lifelong performance piece that I'm challenging myself to do. So a lot of people think it's a persona, like I'm a character. It's not a character. It's me, but forcing myself to take ownership of being an independent, beautiful woman and giving myself the ability to do, wear, be who I want through this channel. And so for me, when I was coming up with this concept, any art event related, I'd have to go as Miss Art World. And I know that sounds silly, but it's extremely hard being a shy person to go to a gallery reception and force myself to wear the sash. Sure. Because I'm opening myself up to criticism, like who is she? Why is she calling herself Miss Art World?
Right.
Like,
how dare she?
Exactly. Right. She not nominated or gave
self-proclaimed.
Her exactly. Yeah. So it's like, how dare she? Yeah. I think a lot of women don't take ownership of their body and say, no, I am allowed to say, like, I am beautiful, I am smart, I am strong. And so this is my outlet to force myself to do that.
Well, and it's interesting too, because if, we're living in this sort of culture of shaming, and I could see how, the quote unquote, the regular suspects of the art world would look at a beautiful person who comes into a gallery setting and judge them, right? Well, they're beautiful, so they can't be smart. Or they're beautiful because, or they must not know art. What are they here for? Why did they go to the wrong party? Right. And then what I love about what you do is you double down, right? And put a sash on and say, no, yes, I'm beautiful, but I'm also Miss Art World. Right. And so I don't know if this is part of your intent, but what I like about it is you're actually holding a mirror up, whether they realize it or not, to their own bias and prejudice and what's the other word? But, all those words.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. And it's something that I'm challenging myself now. And now it's being recorded. So I have to do it.
It's on the record.
When I'm 80 years old, I still want to be able to go out as Miss Art World. I'm married. So a lot of people have asked me, why am I not Mrs. Art World? And for me, a lot of my work thinks about feminist ideas. And so men are Mr. their whole life and women, they're Mrs. because of marriage. And I don't feel like I need to change because I'm now married. Right. So it will remain Mrs. forever until I'm dead.
I wonder if a competing artist will show up one time with Mrs. Art World, and then and then
there'll be a throwdown.
It's a throwdown. By the way, that's a good concept for the next art performance. Miss Art World and Mrs. Art World going at it.
Yeah, I've actually had women ask me if they can be like Mrs. Art World Bakersfield or Mrs. Art World Kentucky, and I'm like, well, that's an interesting concept.
By the way, this gives you opportunity to expand the franchise, as they say.
There'll be a bunch of Miss Art Worlds running around at some point.
Oh my God, it's a takeover.
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's great. Well, Katherine, Miss Art World, before we sign off, and this has been fantastic Thank you for coming. Please come back. Will you come back?
Of course.
Yay. Maybe Lisa will come next time.
Yes. And we're going to have you on our podcast
Yay,
as well.
I look forward to that. So tell our listeners one last time about your upcoming show and the podcast and your socials and where they can find you.
Okay. So you can find me missartworld.com, Instagram, Miss Art World. Podcast is Art World Podcast on Instagram. We also have a website, which you can find it on the Art World Podcast. And my show is September 27th. It's a Friday. Starts at 7:30, and it is at Studio Channel Islands Art Center in Camarillo.
Fantastic. Well, I'll see you there.
Great. Thank you so much.
You got it. Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to like this episode and share it with your friends on social. And if you haven't already done so, please be sure to press subscribe and follow us on IG at Not Real Art Official. We appreciate the support. Sourdough out.